Good morning, and I'm happy to be here, the second edition of what is now becoming a good platform, largely for the Global South to meet, to exchange ideas, and to see how the global economy can be an effective instrument of bettering people and their lives. So let me start with thanking CII, Sanjeev Puri, Dinesh, Chandrajit Banerjee, and today on the dais is the Finance Secretary Tuhin Pandey. But very importantly, I'd like to extend on behalf of CII and on behalf of Government of India a warmest welcome to our very gracious ministers, His Excellency Minister Dorji from Bhutan and His Excellency Minister Musa Zamir from Maldives. We are grateful that you found time to participate and come and share your thoughts with us in this forum. And I look at this event as one of the major, I think I've said this earlier once before, this is a major platform through which the voice of the industry, voice of commerce, voice of concern from domain experts which come through is heard, and we greatly rely on the inputs that I get from here. So thank you for continuing with it for the second time, and I wish that this event becomes a major platform for hearing the concerns on economy from the Global South, and also has in the audience and as participants eminent representatives from the developed economies, because the world can no longer be divided in these kind of very comfortable zones of globally advanced and globally not so advanced, or then looking at factors of production which are under severe stress. So today, let me start by appreciating the CII for taking up a topic, I think, which is just the relevant one for today, the decadal priorities for global economy. We may be talking about it in different fora and with different emphasis given, but today, when we talk together, each one of us from our own perspective, we understand what the world needs to do immediately. And that is going to be critical for our lives on several aspects. So I'll just put my thoughts across today and not get into any data at all, but only flag issues of concern where industry together with policymakers, strategic leadership together with citizens forums will all have to work on those larger goals. Otherwise, the decade would be frittered away. We can't even restore or claw back where we were before the COVID. But what we need to do is not just go back to where we were before COVID, but claw back more so that we are able to enter into this century with a lot more. We are already into it, 2 decades have passed, but enter into the middle of the century with a lot more strength. So broadly, I would think, first of all, the attempt both of industry and governments everywhere should be to restore some global calm, restore some normalcy. No way can there be enough justifiable reason for skirmishes or war. So the first effort, I think the global priority for this decade should be restore normalcy. Talk, sit and discuss. War should be avoided. Disruption should be avoided. They are the main cause for supply chain disruptions. They are the main cause for disruptions in food value chains. And also, when you look at it, inflation globally is a big challenge. But inflation, as you know, doesn't respect borders. Inflation is so contagious that nowhere is any country's effort today is completely successful, because beyond its powers are inflation forces which come in. And therefore, the primary cause, I would think, is the disruption, the skirmish, the war. And as a result, world is facing a challenge which is reflected in very many ways in our economies. So I would think it's incumbent upon all of us, industry, government, policymakers, citizens and citizens forum, to tirelessly try to have some normalcy. Second is the oft-discussed problem, which Sanjeev Puri also referred to, supply chain disruption. The world tasted success of spreading supply chains on the principles of efficiency rules, scale rules, so Adam Smith rules, and therefore we located such production centers or hubs where it was economically making sense. But today, would there be anyone in the audience who will disagree if I say just economics doesn't prevail? Just the economics doesn't prevail, strategy prevails, politics prevails. So even if it made supply chain, if it made economic sense to concentrate production of certain particular commodities or goods or even services in some pockets and derive the benefit of such a concentration, today the concentration risk is playing out in so many different ways, not because of economic sense or economic not making sense. It's more on politics. It's more on strategy. And therefore today, economy will have to keep in mind, or consideration, commercial considerations, or economics, whether it is scale-based economics, will all have to look at blending economy and its priorities also with politics and with strategic needs. So when you talk of supply chains, when you talk of wanting to restore supply chains to some kind of ease, frictionless supply chains, let's not forget that it is just not economics, it's more than that. What is all that we are talking about when we want to de-risk ourselves, when we want to remove from certain concentrations +1, +2? What are these theories? They didn't emerge out of inefficiency of economics. They emerged out of economy being influenced, economic principles being influenced by political principles. And therefore, I think somewhere we have to inbuild in our own decision-making just not economic sense, but also political and strategic sense. Supply chains will have to be restored, but you would reset it, you would realign it, you would make sure that they are spread so much that no political or geopolitical or strategic risks will threaten our well-being. And why do I say well-being here suddenly? It's because unless economies lift themselves and lift their people from such mores that we see, particularly in the global south, we cannot speak of any right, human rights or anything emerge out of economic well-being. And only then the other political rights and other things fall in place. If basic needs are not met of human beings, we are not in a position to speak, or we do not have a right to speak about political and other rights. So I think supply chains, lessons that we've learned in the last few years, in the last decade, should tell us that we have to now realign ourselves. Industry will have to realign itself, not just on economic principles. Third is the climate change, again something which Sanjeev Puri rightly spoke about. Climate is becoming a big issue, and here it is not just who's getting affected worse by one or the other. I think climate change has hit all of us in very many different ways. But what are more than the climate challenge itself, is the challenge of finding resources to meet those challenges. A lot of discussions happen, a lot of promises are made on the table, but nothing is realized as much as was spoken. So climate change is something for all of us to commit ourselves like the intensity with which we commit for removal of poverty. I'm sure most of us in every country, advanced or developing or emerging, commitment to removal of poverty, commitment to working together with our poor at different levels and different scales is a commitment which all of us are living with and wanting to perform on. So equally, I would think it's important that on climate, we commit ourselves to make sure our people don't lose their hard-earned wealth, hard-earned small assets, their lives to climate vagaries. Extreme weather events are taking away hard-earned resources of the poor people. Are we giving them resilient infrastructure? Are we giving them a livelihood which they can quickly restore after a major event? Are we giving them such insurance, let us say, to take care of such economic disaster which may fall on them? So I think climate challenges will have to be looked at from various different perspectives rather than just emission. Yes, emission is an indicator. It's a diagnostic tool. But after that, how do we sort the problem out? Who puts the money in? Do we wait for a collective resource to reach us? Or is it that some of us will start doing our little bit for our own countries? Waiting for something which is going to come will lose the advantage, will make us lose the advantage of a number of years where we have not acted. We wouldn't have acted and therefore we lost. We will tend to lose the advantage that we have. And the next one on the decadal priorities, I would think, is agriculture and allied activities, where you need a lot more innovations, where you need a lot more technology application, and also making sure that these are applied in such a way that the farmers and those who are engaged in agri-related activities have a better livelihood, and at the same time, we ensure the food security of the world. So we need to look at agriculture practices, each within its own context. Water-thirsty crops should be replaced by others which are coarse grains, but yet the protein requirement of the world will also have to be addressed. So agriculture shouldn't be looked at in the same fashion that we've looked at it all these years, centuries. But today we have to look at various different ways. Your picture very clearly showed at the beginning the various forms in which we are reforming agriculture without depending on very scarce resources, just like water and so on. But at the same time, rapidity with which we engage in bringing novel and innovative ways for agriculture and allied activities is also a very strong instrument for security and also containing supply side and inflationary pressure on agricultural commodities. It is absolutely important. Similarly is the issue of handling water. Not every country is blessed with abundant supply of fresh water. But how are we going to handle this challenge? Because it's getting scarcer even by the years. So that will be a decadal priority, I would think. Industrial reset is something which I've already spoken about. Industry will have to look at ways in which it can adapt to the newer challenges which are happening. And in that, as a next point, I would like to say, scale cannot be just the criteria. Large and larger corporations are welcome because they give you the advantage of scale. But I would also think scale together with spread. And when I say spread, there are countries like India who have always had the strength of the smaller and medium-sized enterprises. We need to have a blend of large for the scale and small for a horizontal scale. And when I say horizontal scale, you cannot have one unit established in one place and producing with efficiencies of scale. But they can only generate a certain number of jobs. When you spread it across, and there are many more medium and small size units everywhere, each one doing their own. Of course, the country should ensure quality is established. Many other efficiencies which come with technology are also brought in into them. Unless enterprises spread across the length and breadth of any country, particularly for large countries like India, particularly for large countries with population of the youth now in our favor. Unless we spread across, and unless we have the advantage of scale in that sense, that you spread it across the country and give that energy for the micro, small, and medium enterprises, you're just not going to reap the benefit for your demographic dividend, which is waiting to be fully realized. So I would suggest for the decadal priority, industry should work together with small and medium units to see how they can be supportive of the large unit equally as much as they supporting job creation. So today the problem is not economic success, which is just production, but it is also economic success, which can spread benefits for those who are waiting for jobs and wages. So that, I would think, will be facilitated, will be made easy through technology. Sanjeev Puri, again, referring to him again, spoke about how India's DPI, digital payment interface, India's technology-driven ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, and India's technology stack for agriculture have all brought in at one go the advantage to democratize access. Farmers are able to today access global markets. You're able to give them the advantage of technology, which instantly gives them the benefit of information about the soil condition, about the intensity of crop output, about how a weather situation can affect him or how we can prevent damage. So that agri-stack, which is, I'm sure, going to be the next big thing that you hear from India. You heard about the digital payment interface. The agri-stack is the next big thing from India, technology-driven, which is going to take care of agriculture and allied activities. So the same technology bridge is what I would strongly suggest as a facilitator for scaling up in largeness and scaling across, which will share the benefit for all the youth who are located in different areas, but who do not have access to resources or to opportunities. So technology it is going to be. And similarly, when I talked about access and opportunities for the youth, it is that technology, the digital learning instruments that you can bring in. India's brought in digital university, trying to give extension training for youth in different far-flung areas through technology. Industry today, I'll call upon you. You should work together, not just with the Indian government, but with governments across the world. If you are looking for trained and skilled manpower at various levels that you may need them, unless you are going to work with the governments to have them be trained in such skill sets which you require, it is going to be difficult for industry to say, I need manpower, but I don't get the right kind. You can't sit and ask somebody to provide that for you. I would strongly call upon industry to work together on a priority to ensure use the technology, use digital instruments to make sure youth who get out of universities are trained in such a fashion that they are available for you when you want the manpower. So I would think that should be a decadal priority for industry as much for governments. And the final point that I'd like to put as a point of priority for the decade, as much for you, more for the government, is debt and financial security. Intergenerational debt is mounting on countries. Responsible economies, and I speak for the industry and for government, responsible economies can't be run with borrowings so large that the next generation and generation after that already knows what it is liable to repay. That after all will have to be passed through as taxation. You're not going to be able to generate that resource to pay back the debt that you've taken. So I would think it is absolutely important for governments, and for industry to work together to say how best debt can be managed at the national, and I hate using this word, but I would say at the subnational level. I mean the federal and the provincial level. It is important for us to manage our debt. COVID brought us to such a situation where, well, whether you liked it or not, you had to borrow. And I'm not saying that we remained outside of borrowing. We also borrowed. But we are super conscious about the fact that we cannot burden our forthcoming generations with debt that is not sustainable. Yes, debt is required. But we need to be, in this coming decade, I think the priority should be to manage your finances and borrow, yes, borrow for building assets, borrow for managing better, but it cannot be such borrowing that you leave the next coming generations worried about how they can service it. And financial security is something also which is important, and I'm sure you recognize how nations today are worried, and multilateral development institutions are not yet ready to cope with the modern requirements, post-COVID requirements of countries, particularly in managing their financial situation. India, during its G20 presidency, made sure that we gave a recommendation with the international expert group that we constituted for the reform of multilateral financial institutions, because they should rise timely to help countries that need that kind of a finance and also assistance in time. Otherwise, economies are going to be severely challenged. So without taking more of your time, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I've just shared some thoughts, but these are, I suppose, going to be very important for the coming decade. Thank you very much.